Hi everyone, it's Niamh here and welcome to my art journaling channel. Today we're going to be looking at making some abstract mark making in our art journal layouts. Now I use mark making as a form of relaxation. I do it when I don't know what I want to do on a page, when I don't really want to think about things, I just want my hand moving across the page. It's also a really great technique to use when you've got some new products. So it might be new colours, it might be new paint pens, just stuff that you want to practice and see how it works over the top of each other. This can be a really great way to just get into your supplies without having to overthink things and just play around. So I'm starting off by making a really simple background, and all it is just painting on patches of a similar colour. So in this colour scheme I'm just using shades of blue, from really light to really dark, and I'm painting them on in sections, 3 different sections. So each colour has 3 different sections, and the only reason for that is I don't have to think about it. It sort of gives you some visual triangles. I don't know, it's just a rule I follow and I find it works for me. So once I've done my background, then we start on the mark making, and this can be as simple or as complex as you want it to be. And I would urge you, if you're watching this video, to sort of take note of where you like this, because for some of you, you might stop here. For others of you, you might keep going after I've finished. It really is addictive. There is no right or wrong. Some of the rules that I will give you though, and particularly when you're doing this type of mark making, it's really important that you extend out into different areas. So you will notice that the green that I'm doing right now, I'm going on that dark green area, but I'm also extending it out into that turquoise area over to the edge of the page. I'm putting it over the pink. I'm not avoiding the pink, I'm sort of blending it in. Same with where I'm doing it now. I'm sort of taking it right down over a few different sections. When I've taught this in classes, some students have sort of kept, for example, the green dots in the dark blue area and the pink dots in the turquoise area, and just contained it within there. And while that works, it gives you a completely different effect. By actually extending it out and over a number of different areas and overlapping, it gives you a more organic feel. It gives you a bit of flow across the page. It's also really important when you're doing this to connect to edges. So you'll notice most of my marks have actually connected to an edge in some way, shape or form. They're not just floating in the middle of the page, which is another sort of, I hesitate to call it mistake, because there's no mistakes in art. But sometimes when things look a little bit odd, it's possible because it's kind of floating in midair. It's not connected to an edge in some way, shape or form. Once I've sort of finished doing dot making in the background, I tend to go in with some bolder pattern pieces that again are overlapping. So I've got this really bright yellow, and I'm sort of making big scallopy shapes with it. I've got the big overlapping circles. You'll also notice, just like my background, I'm tending to do stuff in 3s, and as I said before, that's just I don't have to think about it switching my brain. If I've done it in 3 spots, it should look okay. So sometimes I break my own rule, but in most cases it's just so ingrained in me. It's just what I tend to do. Now I'm going in with some lighter colours again, and just, whatever marks you want to make, and they can be as simple or as complex as you want them to be. But these are just little U shapes. The dots is just, not even thinking about it, it's just pressing the brush to the page. So if you struggle with doing stuff like this, and particularly if you've got young kids at home, what I suggest you do is go to their painting box if they've got one, get their oldest, crappiest, most terrible kids paintbrushes you can find, and actually just try doing this with those. And because the paintbrushes are so awful, they actually make some really interesting marks on your pages. So I've found some of my girls' brushes, they've used and abused, make beautiful flower shapes if you just squash them onto the page, because the kids have already done the hard work for me and I just have to follow what they've done. So experiment with what you've got around you. And if you want perfect circles, use the end of a pencil, dip that into your paint and dip it in, or use the end of your paintbrush to drag through the paint to make some marks on the page. So There is no right or wrong. You can do this in any way, shape or form you like, and it's all about having fun. So, as I've said before too, take note as you're going along, see where you like this gets to, and stop where you feel comfortable. The next thing I'm adding, so I've done all the paint work, I'm now going over with some gloss spray. So this is the Dina Wakley gloss spray. I'm just using the white. I'm just painting on some circles and putting on some splatter. I tipped my book up so I could just get those natural drips going down the page. I love drippy paint on the page, and having something that's more fluid like the gloss sprays or acrylic ink really helps to add onto the page, and just add a different texture and layer of, it's not opacity, because they actually come up kind of translucent, so it just gives you different layers. Because I really like that, I decided I'm going to try it with a different colour. So I've got fuchsia, and I'm doing the same thing but dripping it down the other way, again just to get a really interesting effect. So you can see as it dries, I've got some light bits, I've got some darker bits, and it's just a really cool effect to lay over the top. The acrylic sprays are permanent when they're dry, so they're not like the dilution sprays. If I was using the dilution sprays and then putting this ink over the top, it would run, it would reactivate. So they are a permanent ink when they're dry. If you didn't have acrylic spray or acrylic inks, you can use watered down acrylic paint to do the same job. This is actually a permanent drawing ink. It's a really, really black ink, and one of the things that's really important when you're doing pages like this, when you get towards the focal end of it, is to add some black and white to your page, because that just really defines your finished page. So again, I'm being really loose with what I'm doing, making really loose brush strokes. I'm going over that yellow to make sort of the black the focal point. I'm doing lots and lots of branches because I was just having fun drawing them, you know. There's no right or wrong to how you do this. Just do what you like and stop where you want to, is really important. If you wanted to draw that out with pencil first of all, of course you could. I just was having fun drawing it freehand. It's fairly simple. It's just a line with some loops coming off it, if you break down the shapes. So before you go on to the next part, is really important that your page is dry. I'm pretty impatient. I like to do everything at once. Obviously you can wait a little bit. And I'm just going over the top again with white pen. Now that might seem really redundant because I've just done black and now I'm adding white to it, but hopefully you can sort of see on screen. It just helps it pop out of the page a little bit more with that white over the top. I'm fighting my pen just a little bit because I didn't leave the ink long enough to dry. So sometimes it's hitting wet patches of ink and I'm having to just clean off my pen nib a little bit and keep going. I found the Posca paint pens, which is what I'm using, are fairly forgiving. Even if I do go through a pool of wet ink, I usually don't ruin any of them. So yeah, take of that what you will. When I'm drawing on this, you can also see I'm being really loose with my lines. I'm doing like 2 or 3 lines over the top of them, making it really scratchy and really loose, and that has the hand-drawn part of it. The final thing that I'm doing, or one of the final things I'm doing on this page, is adding in some extra mark making, because you know I didn't have enough in the background anyway. But this time I'm using my paint pens to do it. So paint pens are acrylic paint in a pen form. You know, they dry fairly quickly, but just be aware you do need to actually let them dry a little bit. So don't put your hand straight in them, because you will get it over your hand. But they're really, really handy for just adding in that fine pen work. Now if you didn't have this and you had gel pens, they would work the same, but again you'd probably have to make sure your background is really, really dry before you start using gel pens over the top. And I'm just using a variety of different colours. Santa may have been very generous to me a few years ago and bought me the full set of these pens, but what I would suggest is you obviously don't have to have a full set. Use colours that you really like, are the colours you go to most often. I tend to find I use a lot of pinks and turquoise, so I've got them in a few different sizes and they're the ones I tend to pick up most of all. But If you don't have any paint pens, I would highly recommend getting at least a thicker black and white and a thin black and white pen, and that will give you a lot of versatility with what you're doing. One of the next thing I did was just splatter over, because I really like the splatter in the background, was to splatter over some gold ink. Just again to sort of tie it together, and I find splatters a really great unifier. It is very random, you can't really control where it's going, but because it sort of splatters over everything, it's a bit like that mark making in the background I talked about. By going over everything, it ties it together. If it was very particular in one place, it would look a little bit odd. So the last thing I'm doing is, I thought I needed to put a quote on here. So I decided to put bloom with grace, which I thought kind of fitted in with the background I had, with the sort of floral, naturey type effect. So I'm trying really hard with my handwriting at the moment. I'm not great with script handwriting, but I'm giving it a go, and I'm really liking how it sort of looks. One of the things I've learnt, apart from don't press down too hard on your pen when you're writing with it, because it will bleed out everywhere like it just did there, is that if I thicken up my downstrokes and make my upstrokes thinner, it gives sort of a beautiful balanced look to your page. So while I was doing this, I had space for bloom and with, but the grace was kind of going to get lost, and I kind of knew that going into it, and I was tying up whether to do that in white instead so it stood out, but I didn't think it would look great, so I thought I'd go with black anyway, and make sure, like I always do with my script anyway, to outline it with the white pen to help pop it out from the background, which is what I did. I then thought I'd go in with some gold pen as well, just to give it a little bit of extra oomph to try and pop it out, which helped particularly with the grace. Please ignore my head getting in the way. And again, I pressed down too hard. So this is one of the things I do like about having paint pens, is the fact that if you've got a wet wipe, you can wipe it away. Because all my layers underneath are acrylic paint, I know that they're permanent when they're dried anyway, so I can wipe away and be fairly confident I'm not going to wipe away any of my background, and I was able to fix that up fairly easily, which I love, having that little bit of flexibility that, you know, if I make a mistake, it can be fixed. It's not the end of the world. So, and if it couldn't be fixed, you could cut out a piece of cardboard and stick it over there and it'd be fine. So, you know, it's no big deal. So you can see with the gold there, just helped pop that out from the background a little bit, and by the close-up you can kind of see all the mark making in the background. So I hope this has inspired you to do some mark making. It is so much fun, it is so relaxing, it is so good for your well-being, just having that time to just play, and it's a great way to use new supplies and see how they work together. Use a new ink and drip it over the top of some acrylic paint that you've got and see what reactions you get. Until next time, bye for now.